So for example, you have the selection of the Diebold, you have open source code, which was proprietary with Diebold and with Dominion. So you cannot get at what's the problem, because Dominion says, well, we own the election code, we own the software, we own the hardware.
This raid in Europe, in Germany, apparently was not a raid against Dominion servers. It was a raid against CIA servers on a U.S. military base. That was the CIA farm that was being used to manipulate elections all over the world. So we're actually looking at a major international takedown of the deep state at the same time.
Hey friends, Sean from SGTReport.com here. Hey, before we begin this interview, I'm going to plug my Patriots Supply, prepare with SGTReport.com, and here's why. Because if Joe Biden gets in, what's coming is a very dark winter. His words, not mine. This is what they want, and the question will be, if they lock things down long enough and hard enough, will you be able to feed your family? Will you be able to get food? What happens to the supply chain? So head on over to preparewithsgtreport.com and you can save big on a 4-week full supply of emergency storable food, and it will be shipped to you fast from a vendor you can trust, My Patriot Supply, and you can save big right now. I will leave the link to preparewithsgtreport.com below. So get your order in today and be ready for the Great Reset. And friends, just one other word. If you haven't already, please try the Brave browser. It's free, it's faster than Chrome, and it will never ever spy on you like Google's Chrome does. Say goodbye to Big Brother. Say hello to Brave. I'll leave the link below. Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so very much for pushing play. Thanks for finding us. I know how hard that is to do unless you know about my BitChute channel or my Odyssey channel or sgtreport.tv. However you are finding us, maybe it's iTunes. Thank you so much for tuning in, Patriots. I'm very, very pleased to have on the line Cynthia McKinney, who served 6 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives, and she actually represented the people of Georgia, unlike so many of the snakes in government. And former CIA officer Robert David Steele, they both wrote a book together, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, Unrig, Election Reform Act of 2020, A Citizen's Guide to Achieving Democracy with Integrity. Boy, that seems like a timely book. Welcome, Cynthia, and welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yes, us. We're
That's right, because I'm speaking for Robert for a change.
We're
he
almost
tries to speak for me, but he can't.
No, I can't speak for Cynthia, but we did turn into a power couple in some ways. I mean, who would have thought a white alt-right nationalist former spy with a black female alt-left serious progressive, not a Sanders communist progressive, but a serious progressive. So I'm honored to know Cynthia McKinney and Sidney Powell and a few other people.
Well, I am honored to know you both, and I wanted to start with this question, really. Cynthia, your reaction to something Sidney Powell said very recently. She said, "These are the most important 2 months of our republic." Your thoughts?
Well, unfortunately, she's absolutely correct. And I have had some questions myself about the direction and the orientation of the Trump administration and the Trump campaign. But last night, Sidney Powell tweeted something out that gives me reassurance. And that is that she has been authorized by the president to give it all she's got. And I trust this woman. And she's got a Southern accent like me too, so that helps. But she is just a formidable opponent, and she veritably turned around what seemed to be a doomed situation for General Flynn. She turned that whole situation around because of the perfidy of the individuals in the FBI, Department of Justice, the Obama administration. And the bottom line is that we have seen these days before. This is not something new for us, but now we have a serious opportunity to quash this rebellion, this regime change, this color revolution that has been thrust upon us. And I hope that we will do that. I know we can be successful if we unite.
Robert, the most important 2 months of our republic, what happens if we don't quash this coup? I'm calling it a coup. Are you calling it a coup?
Yes, it is a coup, but there's a huge difference between past coups and this coup, which is that Donald Trump put in place electronic watermarks and a process for surveilling the entire ballot process. I mean, Cynthia was cheated out of her 7th term when debolt machines were introduced in Georgia. And at the time, they told her, well, is that the president has the entire layout, and we also have everything at NSA, at the National Security Agency. I'm the guy who worked with Bill Binney to basically put out the word that we have it all, including the encrypted telephone calls that will hang John Brennan and Gina Haspel and Christopher Rye and others. So yes, this is the most important 2 months of our life, and I'd say what I said to Sidney Powell in an email. We're not going to win this one in the courts. We're going to win this one in the hearts and minds of the public when they see the evidence. I think the president will triumph legally. I think he will triumph politically. There's absolutely no question but that he will be confirmed as the re-elected president of the United States of America. And a congressional office has just released a letter telling the GSA that Joe Biden cannot claim to be president-elect until the process passes out. So in this 2 months, I'll end by saying, I think in this 2 months, we the people take the country back, and Donald Trump is the guy holding the real hammer.
All right, let's do a screen.
Well, you know what, Sean, if I can just say something, though, because Robert is very optimistic about the outcome. And I, while I want to be optimistic, I'm also realistic. The swamp runs very deep, and it's throughout all 3 branches of our government. And so he's right that we have to win in the hearts and minds of average, ordinary U.S. citizens, but we also have to win in the court, and the courts are also a swamp.
Well, let me throw a curveball at you. I agree with you, Cynthia. We have to win in the courts, and I believe that, let me say this, I don't trust Rudy Giuliani as far as I can throw a piano by the stool. Okay, this guy is playing softball right now. He's doing civil lawsuits rather than criminal RICO conspiracy lawsuits, and he knows the difference. So Ed Vieira made this point that Giuliani is not giving it his all. Now, Sidney Powell is giving it her all, but let me throw the curveball out here. We have all of the emails and texts and telephone calls and game chats and bank transactions when NSA was weaponized by Admiral Roger in favor of President Trump. What he did was the president has the power to declassify anything. So the president probably has 3 or 4 voice conversations of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and a couple of others that he has told them, if you don't play ball with me, I'm going to release this and you're going to be torn limb to limb by the mob. So I think the president does have this under control, and that's the curveball.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned watermarks on ballots. I know Dr. Steve Pieczenik has said that, and then he doubled down, and he said, hey, I staked my career on it. This actually is true. Do you want to flush that out a little bit? Because even if we don't have watermarks on ballots, the statistics, the math, the forensic investigation that Sidney Powell is doing and her team is working on is going to flush out the fraud in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, around the country. But just talk about the watermarks on ballots.
Let me show you what one looks like. On the back of my telephone here, this is a 3-dimensional geospatially trackable, it's an anti-5G thing. But the bottom line here is, first off, DHS did not print the ballots. The ballots were designed by the states and they were printed by various printing companies. But for the first time in history, every state was required to have watermarked ballots and to have an auditable election. This has never happened before in history. So when Trump did the executive order on elections, which I wasn't thrilled with, but now I realize he's smarter than I am, and there were some things in there about foreign interference and other things that were just sheer genius. So when Trump set this up, he set it up so that the watermarks could be hijacked. Now, because of the different printing companies, the way I would have done it is I would have sent in special teams to make sure that the watermarks were, in fact, what we needed. I don't know if that happened or not. based on the math, and also NSA tracks the location of every cell phone always. I've actually posted at Phi Beta Iota a photograph of all the cell phones in and around the White House. And they have the same thing for the Pentagon and so forth. What this means is that NSA is capable of creating a map of every single person who touched ballots. And the distinction between the legal and the illegal ballots is something I will leave to the experts. But the bottom line is President Trump was elected in a landslide, and I think he's going to pick up the House when some of these seats are reversed in California and elsewhere. And I think he's going to pick up some more senators, including the senator from Virginia. I think Mark Warner stole the election from war veteran amputee Gade, G-A-D-E. I think Gade won in Virginia because the rednecks came out in the South, and I think they swamped the pussies in the North.
Let me ask you this. I tend to... Oh, go ahead, Cynthia.
No, I'm just saying, why does he have to use that language?
Oh,
we have a lady in the room, Robert.
The kitty cats in the North.
All right, well, wait, let me ask you guys this. I'm going to play a clip here of Sidney Powell on Fox News in a second with Maria B. But look, if CNN and Anderson Cooper and Wolf Blitzer and MSNBC and New York Times and Bezos blog, if they won't report about this fraud, if they won't report about the evidence of election rigging, if they say there's zero evidence of it, does it really matter how much evidence Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood prove? Did it actually happen if the media says it didn't happen? My point is that the mainstream media is involved. They are co-conspirators in this coup, Robert.
I had that conversation with Sidney before she appeared on television. And I brought to her attention, which someone else brought to my attention. I'm a village idiot. I just have a lot of good people sending me stuff. But I brought to her attention the report on Abe Lincoln using the Insurrection Act to arrest editors and authors who were seditionists and spreading lies and so forth. They are absolutely complicit in what is a RICO network of fraud. And I think there's been a division of labor. Giuliani's been given the lawsuits against the states, and Sidney has been given the media. And I think she's going to take this one to town. I think once you do discovery, and again, remember, the president has multiple golf clubs in his golf bag. One of them is NSA. He literally knows it all. He's got it all. It's all been mapped out. We've got everything. But he also has the Insurrection Act. He also has the Marine Corps, which can do posse comitatus without a waiver. I don't know if people remember this, but the Marine Corps was mobilized to defend the U.S. mail. That was way back in the day. So I'm feeling very comfortable. Now, I am worried because there are some lawsuits that are being pushed back. I'm worried that Giuliani is betraying the president. Giuliani, people need to remember, worked for Michael Chertoff and the Red Mafia. They hired him to get rid of the Italian mafia. And not only did Giuliani take out the Italian mafia, I think Cynthia told me he also switched wives. He divorced his Italian wife and married a Jewish wife.
Well, let's do this, though. Let's stay focused on the real enemies at hand. I actually am a fan of Rudy Giuliani's, and I hear what you're saying, but let's really focus on the enemies of the Republic, which are the mainstream horror media, the Democratic Party, and the people that have plotted to steal this election for a very long time. This didn't just happen 24 hours ago. This didn't just happen a month ago. This has been a plot for a long time. Cynthia, your comment.
Sean, it's not just the Democratic Party either. I mean, let's just get real about this. The Republicans know what happened and what to defend against because they've done it too. And so I think, and another point that needs to be made is that the government is divided. Everyone in the government is not a USA First person. And as a result of this divided government, we don't know which part of the government, or the NSA or the CIA or the DOJ, where is their loyalty? I mean, it's not just that they were treasonous to the Republic, but they are loyal to an entity that is treasonous to the Republic.
Right.
And if you don't get rid of the entity, you can change these faces till the cows come home. but you will still have a republic at risk. And of course, as a person who thinks about sort of political structures and political systems, I'm not so wedded to the idea of a republic as the end all and be all, because I have to give up my sovereignty and give it to somebody else. And then I have to go beg them to do for me what I actually could do for myself in a different sort of organization and an organizational structure. So, but as long as we are where we are now, we also have to understand that we've got multiple deep states. And where's loyalty to these deep states inside these various agencies? The other thing I want to say is that a very close reading of the COINTELPRO papers will inform us that this is not new. We've had DOJ used by presidents, as was done in the Obama administration, to root out political opponents. That's happened before. We've got media, publishing houses, journalists, university professors, preachers even, that were in the employ of the CIA. So this is not anything new. What is new, however, is that we now have an opportunity to educate the public to what has been in existence for a very long time. And as Robert says, if we can win over the hearts and minds of the US public to let them see just how perfidious their own elected representatives are and have been, then maybe we can take our country back. The other thing I want to say is that I have been to too many anti-war demonstrations where at the end of my speeches and everybody's speeches, they always say, and I have said, we will take our country back. But of course we didn't. We were never able to. This time could be very different.
I think this is a great segue to a clip I want to play. This is Sidney Powell on Fox News, guys, and it speaks to the corruption that you're describing. It is so systemic. And I guess I'll just play the soundbite, but I really want your thoughts on this, Cynthia, because it reminds me of the Hunter Biden graft, the Joe Biden crime family graft. Check this out.
We are collecting evidence now from various whistleblowers that are aware of substantial sums of money being given to family members of state officials who bought this software. I mean, we're talking about $100 million packages for new voting machines suddenly in multiple states, and benefits ranging from financial benefits for family members to sort of what I would call election insurance. Because they know that they can win the election if they are using that software. It's really an insidious, corrupt system, and I can't tell you how livid I am with our government for not paying attention to complaints even brought by Democrats, Carolyn Maloney, Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar,
Cynthia McKinney,
over the last several years in written letters with expert reports and some documentation of how corrupt this software is, and nobody in our government has paid any attention to it, which makes me wonder how much the CIA has used it for its own benefit in different places, and why Gina Haspel is still there in the CIA is beyond my comprehension. She should be fired immediately.
Oh my God, it just gives me goosebumps. What does a patriot look like? You just saw it.
Right.
Oh my God, does she have courage? It just makes my blood boil. That you're going to sell out your people, you're going to sell out your state, you're going to sell out the republic for what, dollar bills? It just makes my blood boil.
That's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years.
I know, but we knew about this black box voting, Bev Harris. We've known about this for more than a decade, and she's right. Nobody's done a damn thing about it.
Well, Cynthia,
more than a decade.
Sydney had one mistake in that thing here, where she said that the government, basically, I don't know if she's been completely read into everything that's been done to get ready for this election. This is the most secure, safest election in American history, but that can be read two ways. The way that I read it is that the president is going to triumph because only legal votes will be counted.
Well, again, Robert is very self-assured when it comes to that. And the only thing for me is that if it's not in my hands, then I have some concern. Look at the situation with the judge, with General Flynn, who refuses to release General Flynn, despite an order from the Department of Justice. So when a situation is in someone else's hands, then you have to hope and pray. And that's where we are at this point. I believe, I'm saddened that the Trump administration didn't do more to root out the swamp monsters, and he continued to appoint swamp monsters. Ron Paul called them swamp slayers, and I'll go with that. I was calling them swamp warriors, people who had been in the swamp, people who knew the swamp, people who understood the swamp, but who emerged from the swamp with their integrity intact. And so as this McGregor person that the president has just recently hired, that is a swamp slayer. Clearly, Sydney is a swamp slayer. And there are many, many more people who have been blacklisted, unturned, but they exist throughout the government, throughout Washington, D.C., throughout this country, who have been there, they know the problems, and they know where the solutions to the problems are.
Can I say something?
Please.
The difference between me and you two guys is I'm an intelligence officer. And I want to specify that Mike Flynn has not communicated with me ever since his legal trials started, I think, except for one thank you email when I made a donation. So when I say something, I'm not quoting General Flynn, and I have no privileged access. When Admiral Rogers went up to Trump Tower against the wishes of Jim Clapper, he turned everything around. Essentially, NSA has been weaponized against the deep state in the same way that CIA and the FBI were weaponized against the president, just as they've been weaponized against the American public. Now, on the hammer thing, I had this discussion with Simon Parkes, who's a counterpart in the UK. And in fact, it's on video. And Simon told me that one of the reasons Hammer and Scorecard is such a big deal and is being dealt with behind the scenes is because, as United States versus Throckmorton showed, when fraud is used to achieve a decision or a result, when the fraud is exposed, it overturns that decision or result. Now, Sydney has said we've used Hammer and Scorecard in Venezuela. I'm sure we've used it in Peru and Ecuador and several other countries. We've probably used it to support Angela Merkel. And this raid in Europe, in Germany, apparently was not a raid against Dominion servers. It was a raid against CIA servers on a U.S. military base. That was the CIA farm that was being used to manipulate elections all over the world. So we're actually looking at a major international takedown of the deep state at the same time. I'm confident that we have enough to hang John Brennan several times over. And folks will remember, he was not only the Russian witch hunt guy, he was also Buzzy Krongard's deputy in the undeclared economic war against Russia, the Gold War. That laundered $240 billion in 9/11, which was done by a foreign power with Dick Cheney's oversight. And I think Tucker Carlson now is older and wiser. He wasn't willing to believe Cynthia McKinney and people like me on 9/11 back in the day. But I think Tucker's coming around and has turned into a really good guy. So my bottom line here is this has been long in planning, but what they didn't realize, and I'm going to end with this comment, they didn't realize that not only did the president put in place measures so that he could indisputably prove that this election was stolen for Biden and also at lower levels, but he also set in motion what I think Matt Taibbi is absolutely right to call a WrestleMania drama. In Taibbi's book, Hate Inc., he talks about how the president uses the WrestleMania playbook to educate people. And what I think we're looking at is a very deliberate public education campaign that will culminate in the public burning masks and calling out governors and state legislators who are violating the Nuremberg principle, calling out Fauci and so forth, and ultimately seeing that President Trump has in fact been reelected. And it's in the second term when you're going to see a number of promises kept.
Sean, I would like to say something about the selection process, which you mentioned earlier, and how things came to be as they are now. What you've seen with the Dominion situation and the implication of some elected officials in the management or the ownership or investment in the Dominion company. Basically, what happened in Georgia was the first state to deploy electronic voting machines. And what happened in Georgia was that we had a gentleman by the name of Athan Gibbs, who was an accountant, and he looked at this situation of administration of elections. He looked at it as an accounting problem, and so that called for certain requirements. What was decided upon was something completely different, what we have now that has the problems. So for example, you have the selection of the Diebold, you have open source code, which was proprietary with Diebold and with Dominion. So you cannot get at what's the problem, because Dominion says, well, we own the election code, we own the software, we own the hardware. And so it seems to me that in the future, going forward, we ought to have the source code that's open, and we ought to have hardware that is made with national security specifications. We shouldn't have hardware that's assembled in China counting US votes on servers that are in another part of the world. What is this?
Yeah, it's madness. It's absolute madness. And the American people had no idea that our system was this corrupt. They're going to know it now. But what I don't want to see is this old thing they always pull, which is, let's not look back, let's move forward together. So we'll fix this for all future elections. No, we need this election fixed. And Robert, I want to ask you this, because I've been asking my wife the same thing. If I could be a fly on the wall, what is going on with the Joint Chiefs and the administration and President Trump? What are the conversations they're having? Because this is such a clear and present threat to our republic. Joe Biden is a national security threat. What are the conversations happening?
Joe Biden is a senile old man who's an alleged pedophile who is being controlled by others. The bottom line here is the military is totally on board. And I love Cynthia mentioning Colonel Dr. Doug McGregor. He was actually my thesis advisor for my book on reinventing national security. He is a genius. He is a strategist. He's a victorious tank commander.
And a swamp slayer? So
yes.
I jotted that down because I didn't know who that was. So he was brought aboard by Trump? Trump hired him?
He's the senior strategic advisor to the acting Secretary of Defense, who is himself someone with deep intelligence experience. And I did a post talking about how we might be moving toward an intelligence-driven government, which means intelligence is decision support. But the other guy that Trump put in there was Kash Patel, who's a rocket scientist. And he worked for Dennis Nunes. And Ezra, Warwick Cohen, I can't remember his name, but he's one of Mike Flynn's best guys. He's now Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. The previous Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence blew me off when I tried to tell him we needed to have an open source agency to empower the president for educating the public and so forth. So you've got some real rocket stars here. And I'll tell you what the fly on the walls that I'm talking to are telling me is everything is going. What you're seeing now, let me make a comment, because if I wanted to field the most incompetent losers in the world, I could not have done better than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And if I wanted to really piss off and scare everybody, I could not do better than having Trudeau in Canada talk about how he wants to impose the global economic reset called communism.
I call him the hand of the Queen, by the way. He's the hand of the Queen.
Well, but let me make a point here. I think Tavi's right. I think Trump is running a WrestleMania drama that Mike Flynn and others have designed as an information operations campaign intended to enrage and engage the public. And what you're going to see is some booms at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I will make a prediction. After President Trump is confirmed by the Electoral College, you're going to see 100 resignations in Congress, which will give the president a chance to do a number of appointments and special elections with now completely cowed governors.
All right, Cynthia, unless you had a comment, I wanted to play this soundbite from Lynn Wood. It should buoy our spirits.
Mm-hmm. That are determined to not only uncover the truth, but to expose the truth. And when all is known, I am 100% confident that Donald Trump will be president of the United States for 4 more years. And I'm just as confident that Joe Biden and the people like him that have been trying to steal this election and committing crimes for years, they're going to all go to jail.
You know, I'll pause it there. It's so powerful because it's exactly what we the people demand. If we want to have a republic, if we want to save our republic, it's a republic if you can keep it. Was it what, Ben Franklin who said that? This is it. The most important 2 months of our republic right now. Because if what Lynn Wood just said there doesn't happen, it's game over. I don't know how we take it back, Robert or Cynthia. This is it.
Let me make a very important point, which is that the single biggest accomplishment of how this has been stage managed, and I believe it has been stage managed, is that the white militants have not come out shooting. They have held their fire discipline, and that's hugely important. It was the extreme left, the Antifa, BLM people controlled by the Red Mafia that committed violence and so forth. And it was defund the police that cost the Democrats most of the elections, which they stole back. But I think we're going to find that in places like Virginia and other states, the Democrats actually had to steal House and Senate elections because the Republicans came out and independents came out in force.
Cynthia?
Well, the level of corruption that I've seen and that I've read about and learned about after I left Congress was so high. When Donald Trump, his campaign was buoyed in 2016 when he said, well, the people were the ones that started it. He was the one that's talking about the corruption of the Clintons and the Clinton Foundation. And then people began to say, lock her up. And I joined those people because I had seen the Clinton corruption up close and personal. And so now, of course, if nothing happens in that scenario, where you can even have people sent to Haiti to steal little children, and they get rescued by Hillary's machine. It's just amazing. So now, of course, what we need more than anything else is the kind of justice that Lynn Wood spoke about. And if we are able to get that, then indeed we would be able to save the republic.
Well, let me just make this quick comment. I've talked to several people who are 1 or 2 removed from the White House, and I'm explicitly not including General Flynn. 9/11 disclosure, satanic pedophilia disclosure, naked short-selling Wall Street theft of $100 trillion from Americans and laundering of $100 trillion in dirty money from trafficking in children and drugs are 3 big things. Voter fraud is the 4th. And what I have been told is that all of the models said we have to do voter fraud first. And then we go to Wall Street. And then we go to 9/11. And finally, last, we go to satanic pedophiles. And I created...
Don't forget JFK, because those files were supposed to have been declassified, and they were not.
I agree with you, Cynthia, goddess. And I absolutely think that President Trump needs to talk to Cynthia McKinney, and she has been blocked from the White House with great deliberation for the last 4 years. But I'm hoping that that lockout is about to end.
Well, I just want to ask one final question of both of you, and I totally agree. 9/11 disclosure, the satanic pedophile exposure, it's everything that many of us on YouTube had been doing for the past decade. And what happened? YouTube purged so many of us on October 15th. Patreon followed suit on the 22nd of October. But let me ask you guys this. First, you, Robert, who is going to be sworn in as president on January, 20th or 21st?
President Trump, without question.
Cynthia McKinney, who's going to be sworn in?
Well, it won't be Joe Biden.
I pray to God you're right. Pray to God you're both right. The most important 2 months of our republic. Our guests have been Robert David Steele and Cynthia McKinney. Robert, tell people how they can find you, please, and support your work.
Just look up Robert David Steele.
Fair enough. RobertDavidSteele.com, I think will do the trick. All things CynthiaMcKinney.com. That's your site, right, Cynthia?
That's right. And I'm also on Twitter. I'm a Twitter fiend. And I'm also on Facebook when I'm not in Facebook jail.
Let me just point out, Sean, that Cynthia McKinney is a PhD in leadership with a focus on change management.
Well, and I want to point out that the book you guys partnered on is obviously timely. Unrig Election Reform Act of 2020, A Citizen's Guide to Achieving Democracy with Integrity. We have a republic, guys. Don't let the mainstream media fool you. It's not just a simple democracy. It's a republic if we can keep it. Patriots, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time, Robert. Cynthia, thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in, friends. For real news, you can visit us directly at sgtreport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda. God bless, guys. Bye-bye.